lesson 33 on rounding with a number line. Rounding can be very tricky. I find even my 7th and 8th graders sometimes make mistakes with rounding. So we really want to make sure that we are paying attention and doing our best. Round numbers usually refers to the numbers that end in one or more zeros. We replace exact numbers with rounded numbers because they're easy to work with and they're easy to understand. So to round, we're finding a number that it's near. That's what we're doing. We're looking for the number that it's closest to, that ends in a 0, so it's easy to work with. Look at the digit before the place value you are rounding to. If it is a number between 1 and 4, you're going to round down to 0. And if it is a number between 5 and 9, you're going to round up to 10, and then you'll add that extra 1 into the tens place. Okay, so let's look at some examples. Here we go. And we're going to use a number line today to help us. You can always draw a number line to help yourself. The first example says round to the nearest 10. So since I'm going to the tens place, I want to get to this place, which means I'm going to look at the number right before that, which is the 2. Okay, and I'm going to use a number line and label it so I can kind of get an idea. All these numbers are between 80 and 90. So I'm going to put 80 down here, and this will be 81, 82, 90. And this number ends in a 0, and this number ends in a 0. So I want to find out where this number is. Is it closer to 80 or is it closer to 90? And I'm going to do that by looking at the second number. So, and this is kind of a number we always want to look at too, is the 85, because that's halfway in between. If it's halfway or up, then we're going to round it up to the 90. If it's below halfway, then it goes down to the 80. So 82, where is 82 on our number line? 82 is right here. And so is 82 closer to 80 or is it closer to 90? Good, it's closer to 80, so this would round to 80. Now following the directions I gave you before, if you look at the second number, the number right before the number we're rounding to, it's a 2. So since 2 is a number between 1 and 4, we would round the 2 down to 0. And rounding the 2 down to 0 would make this 80. Let's look at our second example, 89. So 89 is also between 80 and 90. I'm going to look at this number right before the tens place, which is a 9. And I'm going to find it on my number line, which is right here. So is 89 closer to 90 or is it closer to 80? Good, it's closer to 90. Now look at the rules I gave you. So here we have a 9. A 9 is a number between 5 and 9, so we would round up to 10. So if I rounded this 9 up to 10, then I would be adding 80 plus 10. Whereas here I added 80 plus 0 because the 2 rounded down to 0. So 80 plus 10 would be 90. All right, let's look at 85. Here's our last one. This one's tricky. A lot of times when things end in a 5 and they're halfway in between, students aren't sure whether to go up or to go down because it seems like it's equally as far from 80 or from 90. But our rounding rules tell us that anything that ends in a 5 will always round up to 10. So 85 is actually closer to 90 because 5 would round up to 10 and you would get 80 plus 10, and so this would round up to 90. All right, what about if we were rounding to the nearest 100? So this is a little different, but it's kind of the same. So if we're rounding to the nearest hundreds, you want to find the hundreds place in your number, which is right here, the 4, right? And now we're going to look at the number right before the 4. So that number is a 2. I'm going to use my number line again to help us. So I'm going to start, all these numbers are between, they're in the 400, so they're between 400 and 500. So I got 400, this would be 410, this would be 420, 430, 440, 450, 460, 470, 480, 490, 500. Remember when we did scales before, how we talked about how you don't have to label every single number as long as you realize that the scale is going up by equal increments. So here we go. We have our scale. We have 420. Is 420 closer to 400 or is it closer to 500? Well, 420 is right there, and so it's closer to 400. So this number is going to round to 400. Let's look at our rules and figure out if we could do it without a number line. So we have our number right next to the one we're rounding to is a 2. So if the number is between 1 and 4, then I round down to 0. So if this rounded down to 0, it would be like adding 400 plus 0, which would give us 400. What about this one? So here I have 465. So 465 would be right about here. Is that closer to 500 or is it closer to 400? And I can always identify halfway in order to help me with that decision. So I can see it's closer to 500. Now let's look at our rules to see if we could have done it without a number line. So I'm trying to go to the hundreds place, which is right here. So I'm going to look one space before that, which brings me to my 6. And since 6 is a number between 5 and 9, this is going to round up to 10. So that means in this case, I'm adding 400 plus, and if this became a 10, this is 10 tens because it's in the tenths place. So it's actually 100 that I'm adding, because this is the ones place, what we were dealing with before. Here's already the tens place. So if I had 10 tens, which is what I just rounded this up to, that's like adding an extra 100. So 400 plus 100 gives us our 500. Here's our last example. Here I have 409. So this is, I'm rounding to hundreds. I'm going to look at the place next to it. And what do I see right here? A 0. Oftentimes students see this 9 and they think that that means they should round this up to 5. But the problem with that is that this 9, if I rounded it, would only round up to 10 and make this 410. That 409, if you think about where that is, that's all the way over here. It's just a little bit over 400. It's not even quite up to 410. It's right there. So it's much closer to 400 than it is to 500. If I use my number line, it would be hard to make that mistake. But let's look at it even with our trick. So here, we're going to look at this number. This number is a 0. Is 0 closer? Is that going to round all the way up to 10 or be down to 0? Well, obviously it's going to round to 0. So this is going to be 400 plus 0, which means that it rounds to 400. All right, well, that is that entire lesson. I hope that you guys found that helpful. Please rewatch the video if you are confused by this at all, so that way you will be ready to work with it in class. Get to work.